It may feel impossible to quit porn right now, but it's actually much more simple than you realize. If you don't know me, my name is Krishna, and I help young men quit their porn addictions by teaching the lessons that I personally learned throughout my journey. I remember there was, for a very, very long time, for a few years, there was a time period where I would only get to day 3 or day 4 of NoFap, and then I'd relapse, right? And then I would promise myself at the last time that I would relapse, I would never do this ever again. I promised myself that. I'd say, this is the last time I'm doing this. And then literally, sometimes even the next morning, I would relapse again. And then again, I'd feel the shame, I'd feel the regret. I would say, I'm never gonna do this again. 3 or 4 days later, I'd relapse again. Maybe there were times where I could go 1 or 2 days without watching porn. Sorry, not 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 weeks without watching porn. But by that time, the urges were so strong that I just couldn't get past that. That was my limit. For me, if I could only get to max 1 week, and I was struggling on that for months, years, it felt like quitting porn was impossible. It felt like I was making no progress. It felt like I was trying all these things. I was doing NoFap, I was doing cold showers, I was trying to quit cold turkey and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't working. I was only able to get to day 3 or day 4. I felt really bad, and I felt like I couldn't quit this addiction, even though I knew it was bad for me. There's 2 things that I learned from this experience, looking back on it now. There's 2 things that I learned from it. Because eventually, now, I haven't watched porn in a little over 3 years at this point. The first point that I'll make is about the streak in general. If you've watched a lot of NoFap videos, then you probably know that the streak is really heavily valued, right? Getting to day 90, getting to day 180, getting to day 300, getting to day 1000, right? That's incredibly valuable when it comes to NoFap. And it makes it seem like it's impossible to quit porn if your streak is not high enough, right? So you could have gone clean for a month, right? You could have had a 30-day streak, and then on the 31st day, you could have relapsed. And apparently what that does is that sets your streak. That basically takes your streak and puts it back to 0, which means that you've made no progress. But that's not true at all. Because if I track my calories on MyFitnessPal for around 200-ish days, and I made a lot of progress, right? Let's say I lost a lot of weight. Let's say I gained a lot of muscle, gained a lot of strength and everything. Excuse me. But let's say I made a lot of progress in those 200 days. If on the 201st day, I reset my streak back to 0, I don't track my calories for that day, would I have suddenly lost all of the progress that I made over the past 200 days? No, I wouldn't have. And so I could jack off tomorrow, right? I could watch porn tomorrow, and I would lose my streak of 1,000+ days, right? If I do that, does that suddenly mean that the last 3 years have been for nothing? No, of course not. The last really thing about this, if I relapse tomorrow, if I watch porn tomorrow, does that suddenly mean that I have lost all of the muscle that I've gained over the past 3 years, all of the knowledge that I've gained over the past 3 years, all the experiences, everything like that? No, of course not. And so, in my opinion, I think the streak is actually an inaccurate metric of how much progress you've made. I think a better metric is just how many times have you done it over the past month, let's say over the past 2 months. Because you could have gone from watching porn twice a day, right? Watching porn, drinking off 2 times every single day, to then only doing it once per day. Think about that. That's actually a huge reduction. That is huge, because you've gone from 60 times a month to 30 times a month. That's huge progress. That is genuinely huge progress. And let's say, again, you fap once per day, and then you go to every 3 days. That is huge progress for somebody who's been fapping once, twice a day for years. Being able to go from 2 times a day to one, maybe only every 3 days. Of course that's progress. Of course you're making progress when you do that, right? Because if quitting nofap forever, or if quitting your porn addiction forever is the equivalent of hitting a 225 bench press, what you're doing right now is you started with the empty barbell and you're slowly working your way up, right? You're slowly making progress. And I understand you relapse every couple of days, and you got to resist the urges. You feel you need to fight the urges, and then when you do finally relapse, you feel really, really bad. You feel really, really shameful about yourself, right? I understand that. And so the second point that I'll say about this, about why it might feel impossible for you to quit porn, is you can't ever truly quit unless you start facing your demons, right? Unless you start facing whatever it is that you're avoiding. And you have to think, what? Like, there's nothing that I'm avoiding. If you try and quit porn and you're still, let's say you still struggle with loneliness and poor mental health and depression, right, and trauma, all of those things are uncomfortable things to face, especially for us people, right? And they were uncomfortable for me, certainly. And so what did I do? Well, I used porn to escape from those things. And so I remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I struggled a lot with my mental health. And that was also when I was most addicted to porn, right? I remember during that time period, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of parental abuse happening in the household, in my household to me, right? And I was addicted to porn. During that time, I was addicted. Why? Because I was using porn to escape the things that I was avoiding. For me, it was just abusive parents, right? It was my poor mental health, it was my loneliness. Those things are hard to face. And so what do? We use porn to escape from them. We use it as an escape from the reality that we're living in, right? Because we've kind of created, every time you watch porn, you kind of create a mini fantasy world where even though you're watching two people have sex, you are trying to imagine yourself in the place of the guy, right? And that might give you a sense of accomplishment or power or something like that. Pleasure as well. You can't really only focus on the symptom, if that makes any sense. You can only focus on the root cause. Because if you just try and treat the symptom, if you just try and quit porn, guess what? The loneliness is still there, the depression is still there, the anxiety is still there. The trauma, the PTSD, right? That's still there. That doesn't just go away like that when you quit porn. Because if you don't heal your root cause, you might quit your porn addiction, but then you'll just move on to another one, right? You'll move on to drugs, you'll move on to alcohol, you'll move on to video games, for example, right? You'll move on to those things because we as humans, we need something to cope. We need something to cope with this reality, right? Now, there's healthier ways of coping, and then there's unhealthier ways of coping. And unfortunately, porn is one of those unhealthy ways of coping. My actionable step for you is to focus on, instead of just quitting cold turkey, right? Instead of just going from fapping once, 2 times a day to never doing it ever again, focus on just progressively deloading it, right? Because cold turkey rarely works, because essentially what you're doing is you're saying to the person, hey, I know you've never benched 2 plates in your entire life, but guess what? You're going to bench them right now. Imagine if someone said that to you, where you haven't even seen a barbell before, for example, and somebody's like, yeah, you're going to bench 2 plates. You're like, what? What are you talking about? I can barely bench the barbell, bro. What do you mean bench 2 plates? And so by progressive deloading, an example of this is, again, let's say you normally watch porn, you jerk off, let's say 30 times in a month, right? Once per day. Well, maybe next month, why don't you try 25, right? Reducing it by 5 days. That's progress. And then the next month, 20. And then the month after that, maybe 15, and then 10, and then 8, and then 6, right? Do you see what I'm saying here? You're progressively reducing the amount of days that you do watch porn. You're not cutting it off completely, right? Which might sound weird. But the thing is that I know I did this. I wasted so much time trying to go cold turkey. I wasted a lot of time because it didn't work. It rarely ever works. And again, if I track my calories for 200 days, if on the 201st day I don't track it, my streak resets to 0, will I have suddenly lost all the progress that I've made? No. But think about this. Over 201 days, I track my calories for 200. That's sick, right? That's huge progress. And that's what I would be focusing on, or at least that's what helped me as well. Another thing that I'll touch on for the actionable step, that's one part. The second part is finding healthier ways to cope, right? Finding healthier ways to deal with whatever it is that you're facing. Now, there's a lot of nuance when it comes to this, whatever it is that you're facing, right? For me, one of the ways that I coped with the reality that I was living in was obviously porn, but another healthier way was just the gym, for example. And so actually, one of the things that I learned, even just recently, is that whatever it is that you're trying to face, right, that you're running away from, that you need to face, your depression, your anxiety, your poor mental health, right, your longing for love, that's a deep one, isn't it? Those things that you need to face, they aren't as bad as you think they are, right? I heard this quote that said, fear is an ocean that is a mile wide and an inch deep. So it looks like this big thing that you're going to have to go through. But once you step into it, once you actually lean into it, it's not that bad. It's actually, well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not fun. It wasn't fun for me to face my trauma and my loneliness and my depression. It wasn't fun to necessarily face those things. But the thing is that what's the alternative? I just keep living the same life that I'm living. I just keep being addicted. I keep watching porn, right? Nothing's going to change if nothing's going to change. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? And so you only change when the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. And so again, just find healthier ways to cope. That could be the gym, that could be playing your sport, right? Playing an instrument, whatever it is. Doing something that's not porn to help you cope with whatever it is that you're dealing through. And also at the same time, just facing it. Just facing it. Because you need to feel those feelings, because otherwise those feelings are going to control you. I think it was Carl Jung who said, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. If you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You will just say, this is just how I am. This is just how life is. This is just how things are. No. These are unconscious things that control you. The unconscious longing for love that you feel, for example, right? That controlled me for a while. That controlled me to watch porn hundreds of times, thousands of times. And so feeling and facing whatever it is that you're avoiding is the first step. If this video helped you and you want to go more in depth on actually how to quit porn, I have a program. It's 5 phases that you can follow, all laid out for you in order, all the resources, all the modules, everything that you need to quit porn. This is a protocol that I made that I found helped me quit, and it will help you as well if you try. And so if you are interested, then you can go and click the link in the description down below. Take care, brother.